Hello and welcome to the Stormont Sources podcast, where we take you inside politics at Stormont and inside policymaking for Northern Ireland. I'm David McCann, and also on the podcast is one of our regulars, Tim Kearns, who's former special advisor to First Minister Peter Robinson. Hello, Tim.
Hello, David.
And we also have Michael McKernan, who's former special advisor to the SDLP. Hello, Michael.
Hello, David. Hello, Tim.
Hello, Michael.
There we go. There we go. Okay, on the podcast today, the SDLP meets this weekend for its annual conference in Belfast. The party leader has come out swinging against the Alliance Party and is focusing on moving the New Ireland conversation forward. We're asking 1 year into the Hanna leadership what they need to do to recover. Then the Irish language is back in the headlines. Belfast City Councillors will decide later whether to adopt a new language policy, which would lead to a more widespread use of Irish across the city. Advocates of the approach hope that this will lead to a new English-Irish bilingual logo being displayed on council vehicles, uniforms and signs. Unionist parties have voiced their objections. We will be discussing the implications. And finally, the Assembly continue progressing the schools uniform bill proposed by Education Minister Paul Givan. It has received criticism for not going far enough in reducing the cost of uniforms for parents. We're asking, are they right? Okay, on to our first topic this week. The SDLP are meeting for their annual conference in Belfast this weekend. Clare Hanna will be marking 1 year as party leader, and the SDLP will be marking 18 months as the official opposition in the Assembly chamber. As they meet, we wanted to discuss the strategy that the party needs to adopt to recover lost electoral ground. In case you maybe missed it, the SDLP has had quite a number of bad elections from 2022 to 2024, and the question is being asked, are the party on the upwards trajectory, and what do they need to do to maintain or sustain momentum? Michael, you've worked for the SDLP. Should their focus be on the Alliance Party or on Sinn Féin? I mean, the SDLP leader did an interview in the Belfast Telegraph with Suzanne Breen. She was very critical of the Alliance Party, seemed to be the focus of a lot of their criticism. So is that the right approach?
Yeah, I think it is. The SDLP ran, as Tim has mentioned before, numerous campaigns about stopping the DUP, and that didn't really work for them. The DUP wasn't taking any votes off them, whereas Alliance Party was. So I think Alliance are more relevant. I think in relation to Sinn Féin, whatever way the dynamic works, SDLP having a pop all the time at Sinn Féin doesn't work for them either. So I think their best strategy in terms of dealing with the other parties is to, go after Alliance and also let Sinn Féin make their own mistakes, damn them with faint praise rather than attack them. And this old hackneyed thing of, referring back to their misbehaviour in years gone by is just pointless because people have moved on. I must say the SDLP, I think, is actually now in quite a good place. They've some good people. They have a great leader in Clare. And they're united. And for many years they were divided. I don't know if it surfaced that much, but certainly behind the scenes they were divided along quite bitterly at times into factions around different personalities and so on. But that's not the case anymore. They have stabilised in the polls after, as you mentioned, a long period of decline, and they have stabilised, even come up a little bit. And we do know from previous analysis that where they are at the moment, if they could add another 2 or 3%, that would start to translate quite dramatically into seats. So I think they're in a good position. I understand he's called the Lotto. Matthew O'Toole has done well. Lotto being leader of the opposition, he's known in the party, and I think he has put in a good performance. But the main thing is they're united and they're upbeat. And I'll just go back to strategy. They cannot. Clare's job this weekend is to warm up the troops and motivate them for the battles ahead, like any party conference. But in terms of strategy, the SDLP can only succeed within nationalism if it becomes clear that they are the thinking party. The other main party there will always outdo them when it comes to stunts and flag waving and gestures and loud behaviour. They need to show that they have their thinking caps on, particularly against Sinn Féin on the issue of reunification of Ireland, and particularly on the Alliance Party in terms of what is a shared future and how do we do reconciliation. A differentiation strategy with those two key components.
Well, my understanding is, Michael, that Clare Hanna is going to be talking a bit, and a good focus of the conference is going to be moving kind of the unity conversation from kind of debate about a conversation into kind of action. So they've got the former Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, coming to the conference. And I know Clare Hanna is going to be talking a bit about that. We may as well give you a plug. I think you're going to be chairing a panel on an issue as well. Hopefully your voice is a bit better by Saturday, Michael, and we hope you get better soon. What do you think about that pitch, about moving it more toward action? Because that has been a bit of a criticism that we've been maybe too much in conversation mode rather than action mode.
Well, firstly, let me apologise to the listeners of Stormont Sources that my normal dulcet tones have been compromised slightly by a head cold, but there we are, we move on. I think the party has something to say here, because the level of debate has been really poor. I mean, this focus on the timing of a border poll, no rhyme nor reason, just the timing. And Sinn Féin have latched on to 2030 because it's 2030. It's a round number. Just like many years ago, Gerry Adams latched on to 2016 as the time for the border poll because it was the 100th anniversary of the Easter Rising. All fairly silly stuff. And equally silly, Micheál Martin rules it out. And he has moved the debate on considerably by taking up this position that it's not a 50% plus one outcome, or a consensus in both across both communities is required before there can be constitutional change. That is a huge shift in the ground from Fianna Fáil, and that does provide ground for the SDLP to get into the middle and think this stuff through.
Okay. And Tim, you have been a critic of SDLP strategy in the past, how they've conducted themselves in elections. Clare Hanna has made some very pointed criticisms of the Alliance Party, which is, I think that's the right pitch to go to, because the votes that they've lost to Sinn Féin are just not going to be so easily won back. But there's an easy pull to win there with Alliance. Did you smile when you read the interview with Clare Hanna in the Beltel, thinking maybe what you've said has gotten through?
Well, I don't think what I've said's gotten through, but look, if you go back to the early 2000s, the message from then right up to the 22 election has been stop the DUP. And some guise or other, that's been how they've phrased it. We are the party that can stop the DUP, but it's an absolute nonsense, because that is not where they are fishing. That is not the pool that they are fishing in. They are not going to stop the DUP. So look, I mean, I was having a little sketch to see what the leader's speech might be if I was writing the leader's speech, and I kind of thought, look, Claire's got to consolidate. Put forward a message of consolidation. We what we have, we're going to hold, and we're going to build from here. And then I think she's got to target the Alliance Party, and I think that's what she set out in the Belfast Telegraph article. She's got to say, look, the Alliance Party are not the people who have delivered for Northern Ireland. Then I think she's got to get a message and stick to it, and I think that's been the weakness of the opposition in Stormont. And I think I would concentrate on failure to deliver. So government flops, budget black holes, an inability to agree anything, an inability to have substance. They're light on substance, they're high on division. That's what I would concentrate if I was them. And then, as you say, the unity debate, I would say, look, these guys can't deliver unity because they're never going to be in government. We can work with Leo Varadkar, we can work with Micheál Martin, we can work with the guys who are in power to deliver what needs to be delivered. And then I think, B set out the stall, we are the guarantors of the Good Friday Agreement, not just when it suits us. We're not going to be people who everybody plays fast and loose with the agreement. The Alliance play fast and loose with it. DUP, Ulster Unionist Party, Sinn Féin, all play fast and loose. We're not going to do that. Even when it hurts us, we're going to be the guarantors of the Good Friday Agreement. And even when it's in our benefit, we're going to be the guarantors of the Good Friday Agreement. I think that's the 5 things that I would set out if I was writing her leadership speech this weekend.
And just in terms of the parameters of where Clare can go, I mean, she's been critical. She already has kind of previewed some of this, criticism of, look, Alliance doubled their seats at the last election, and what's that delivered for that block of voters. Does that really have the cut through? Because, look, I mean, Clare's big problem is that sure, the executive, we can talk about delivery, but then again, I'm not sure whether they see the SDLP or voters would see, if you voted Alliance or voted Sinn Féin, whether maybe you see the SDLP as the antidote to that.
Well, but if they attack Sinn Féin, they lose votes to Sinn Féin. If they attack the DUP, they lose votes to Sinn Féin. So those strategies aren't going to work. So you've got to do something else. I think they've lost. Their target seats. If you look at them, if they're going to go for Upper Ban again and win a seat there, the target seat is probably Owen Tennyson's seat. Possibly Sinn Féin. If you're going to win a seat in Strangford, I mean, they're much lauded last time they're going to win it and flopped horribly in Strangford. Actually, it's the Alliance seat that you're going after. If you're going to win back your seat in North Belfast, it's probably Nuala McAllister's seat you're going after. So where are they going to grow to get to 11 seats, to get to 12 seats? Well, it's those 3-4 Alliance seats that they could possibly pick off. That's got to be where they're going. They've got. Look, Clare's an incredibly popular leader, but that has not translated through to party votes. So if she could add, up to about 13, get the vote up to about 13% through her personal popularity, you would start to see them being close for a second in South Belfast. You start to see them being very close. They'd take that seat back in Upper Ban. They would probably take a second in South Down if they can get that 4 or 5% swing towards them, and that's going to come from Alliance.
Well, it's interesting. Well, it's interesting. And I'll give this is the shameless plug. I was writing over the weekend for the Brian O'Connor newsletter about where the SDLP's targets lie, and nearly all of them are, as you were saying, Tim, coming from Alliance. You think of the second in South Down, that's Alliance. North Belfast, Alliance. Their main threats, if you take a look at East Derry, where Cara Hunter held by 14 votes, it's Alliance that are knocking on the door of that seat for them there. Now, West Belfast is a bit different, but that seat would come at the expense of people for profit. It wouldn't come at the expense of Sinn Féin. There's actually next to no Sinn Féin SDLP battles. Just shows Sinn Féin's dominance now in the nationalist vote. That comes last. So, Michael, in terms of that, because it has been noted, Michael, I hope you don't mind me saying that you would be someone who would be representative of that kind of SDLP Alliance kind of pool dynamic. So what for someone like you, what would you be looking for?
Are you saying I'm not a true green nationalist and I'm a bit soft on the national question? No, Clare is right.
It's all your talk about integrated education.
That's it, Michael. That's it, Michael. It's just your IEF membership,
Just because you're a nationalist doesn't mean you have to be prejudiced. But anyhow, no, Clare is right to go after Alliance, not only from a tactical voting strategy point of view that you chaps enjoy so much. She's right to go after them because somebody should be going after them, because those two ministers have not succeeded in government. Naomi has gone AWOL. Completely. I mean, she's been accused, and everything she says is getting attacked by others, and there's a vote of no confidence being tried on her. But I mean, the one that puzzled me most was the two governments announced their new proposals for dealing with the legacy. As far as I know, policing and justice was devolved to Northern Ireland. And these guys are coming around saying, here's what we're going to do with this court and this inquest and the police this and all the rest of it. And Naomi's not even in the conversation. I don't even think she was consulted. That should have been presented by three people, the two governments and Naomi. She wasn't even in the conversation. And even in policing, it looks like John Boucher is the Justice Minister more than Naomi Long. Now, I'll be delicate here. I know she's had some private issues that could affect your performance as a minister, and if that's the case, I wish her well, and I wish her that she comes back to her brilliant best. But if she can't return to her brilliant best, she should consider stepping aside, even temporarily, for some of the bright young sparks you mentioned, Owen Tennyson, and even Kelly Armstrong or Nuala in North Belfast. They have a real appetite. And then the second thought that occurred to me there, if she wouldn't step aside for one of them, maybe she should put one of them in instead of the Dara minister, because he's a bright enough guy and he's applied himself. He is not testing his powers to destruction, which is what he will need to do if he is going to make any progress on the signature issue of Loughnane. He's got to be prepared to be hauled into court by the DUP and the Ulster Farmers Union and thrash it out as to who wants the best for Northern Ireland. And if he's not prepared to do that, he should be replaced. So in summary, Clare Hanna is right to go after them because they have not been good in government.
So for Clare and for Matthew, right, coming out of this, because they're the two principal people who we will see the most of in 2027. What's the messages that need to be being talked about in the media on Sunday politics on the Sunday, in the papers on the Monday? What do they need? What headlines does Clare Matthew need to be landing to kind of set up? Because we are in election mode. I don't care what every party saying. We are in election mode. This is why we're seeing the issues crop up that are cropping up. So what headlines do Clare Matthew need to see on the Sunday and the Monday?
Well, I mean, I think it's got to be, we can deliver better than what the executive delivers, and I think that's what an opposition has to provide. And I think they've got to narrow that focus right down to, I think, substance. This executive is not producing anything of substance, and actually that message gets people a bit prickly. The one thing where Emma has got prickly, where Michelle has got prickly, is all around delivery. And we saw the DUP conference a couple of weeks ago where they were at absolute pains to say, we have delivered. And everybody's fighting now in the executive to say who's delivered the night bus for Belfast. I see the Alliance right saying it's them who's delivered. Emma Pengilly with Philip Brett down in the Cathedral Quarter at the exact spot where Sinn Féin can't deliver a bollard, saying, we've delivered the night bus.
British austerity, Tim. Come on now. That's
British austerity cost that £5,000 that prevented a bollard being put there.
And for our international listeners, the Sinn Féin infrastructure minister blamed British austerity for the reason why a bollard
for a £5,000 bollard couldn't be put in. So look, even with within that kind of within the executive, there is this prickly response to you're not delivering. If I was the SDLP, that's where I'd be going. I'd be picking at delivery. I'd be saying you're light in substance and you're heavy in division. You deliver nothing.
I understand, but hang on, but Tim, this has been forever and a bloody day. Like this never. People don't vote on this. They don't vote on this. They've been saying this about the DUP and Sinn Féin from 2011 onwards, Tim. 2011 onwards, what we've had, DUP Sinn Féin return, DUP Sinn Féin return.
I don't think you're directing this fire at the DUP and Sinn Féin. I think it'll be a lot of fun just picking away at them and making them prickly, and that'll be good for party morale and in the assembly. I think you've got to go, as Michael says, at the Alliance Party, a lack of delivery. I would really over concentrate on those departments and say, look, if we were the people who had justice, if we were the people who had DERA, if we were the people who are running these departments, this is how we would deliver. But also do that for everybody else as well. Highlight housing. You're not delivering houses. You're not delivering Sinn Féin the infrastructure to build houses. Just pick away at this lack of delivery, but with a special emphasis, I think, in the Alliance Party, because that's where the battleground is going to be. I think that's where votes can be on. My message, if I was the SDLP, that's what I would hammer. Delivery. You can't deliver. You're incapable of delivering. It's now a chance for somebody else to come in and actually bring real change.
Well, what I would do if I was advising the SDLP, and I'm not, but what I would do is there's a couple of things that I think the conference needs to do. Number one, so this is David's three things that the SDLP need to do to recover. Number one,
we need a jingle. We need a jingle.
We need a jingle.
Furiously taking notes.
That's right.
Callum, bring the intro in now. Right. Okay. Number one, I think they really need to focus on the demand better narrative and stealing that away from the Alliance Party. Alliance cannot run in 2027 on the slogan that really paved from 2017 onwards, that really gave them that amount of success. So I would make them the party of institutional reform. The SDLP becomes that new party of institutional reform, number one. Number two, I think they need a core thing. The problem with the opposition, and one of the reasons why it's not, in my opinion, cutting through, sorry, Matthew, is that it's not focused enough. I would focus on housing. That would be it. That would be the issue. I would just make everything back.
I think that's a mistake, David.
Make everything back to hang on.
Because you're focusing on the DUP. You've got to focus on
let me get them a third one.
He's only on number two.
I'm only on number two.
But number two's wrong. So
let me get to number three. You're so impatient. But the third thing I would do is, I would also have a bit of a wider narrative about what opposition is. Very few people seem to recognise that, we've actually got an opposition now, that this is a chance to actually put new ideas and new issues on the table. And that's actually because, like, Tim, I know you've gone to SDLP conferences in the past. this is a chance for those organisations to actually put ideas on the agenda. It's not, I don't think people recognise that opposition, like the Conservatives in the UK or Sinn Féin in the Dáil, they use think tanks, they use all these different organisations to put ideas on the table, because oppositions don't have the resources to do that themselves. So there are three different things. Now, the last one I will concede is more of an internal thing, but that's how the SDLP will generate the new ideas that will actually give them a wee bit of definition. So sorry, you didn't agree with me on number 2. I think housing, because for the very simple reason I say this, the SDLP lost swaths of middle-class voters to Sinn Féin at the last election. Only that's what happened in 2022. The damn wall broke with middle-class voters, and many of them went to Sinn Féin. Housing, I think, for that cohort, that demo, is a big issue.
I don't agree. I don't agree. Look, you're talking about think tanks. Look at the response to the pivotal report within the executive parties when pivotal think tanks said the executive can't deliver, and that's what I would be hammering. I would say this is what the opposition does, and I would be looking at things, as you say, like the pivotal report, like what's going to come out of the University of Ulster, all of those things that are highlighting the failures in government. And I would really say these people are light on substance, high on division, low on delivery. That would be my message. I would just hammer it. And I think housing is a bad one to pick, because you want to get middle class people back. It's not housing that's going to bring middle class people back. It's when they start to feel in their pocket that things are better. And I would be hammering the message saying, look, there's enough money here to do things. If we had a competent government who weren't fixated with division, who weren't fixated with photo opportunities, who weren't fixated with gumming up the system, we actually could make your pocket better.
I think one of the issues is that to do that they need to make a big reform argument, which I'd be in favour of them doing. And the other big reason why I'd be in favour of them doing it is because the SDLP in the past have just been bad at breaking away from the Hugh Mallon legacy. They've been too wedded to the institutions. And I think saying, look, do you know what? This good idea at the time, secured the peace, but we need to move beyond this now. And Michael, as a long-standing SDLPer, I just wonder what you would think about that, about the break that they need to make with the Hugh Mallon kind of analysis.
I agree with that, and I think they are making it. I think Mallon will disappear into distant memory with the state of affairs he left behind. But no, I would actually go on a different issue. I would go on waiting lists. There's a nice big round number, 500,000. It's not just Mike Nesbitt's problem, although he's promised and he's put numbers on it about the progress he's going to make, but it's an executive responsibility, it's an executive priority. And the beauty of it is there's a big fat monthly number that you can raise, and Matthew can just raise it every month. If any of you saw Owen Murphy's book, Running from Office, down south, he was the health minister, and he dreaded the monthly numbers coming, the housing minister, he dreaded the monthly numbers, the statistical return coming out, because it killed him every month. This on waiting list sets up Matthew with a great opportunity to clobber them with something really important. And remember, 500,000, that's nearly every household in the country. Certainly every family has a member desperately waiting for health treatment. That cuts deep, and that's why some of the things that are going through the Assembly at the moment are so minuscule and peripheral compared to that core issue.
I disagree with you on this idea of breaking away from the Hugh Mallon thing. That's what I said, back at the very start. My fifth thing for the leader's speech would be this guarantors the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement for good and for ill. When it's bad for us to defend the spirit of the Good Friday Agreement, as Hugh Mallon, when it was wasn't necessarily in their interests, they still did what was right in the greater good. So to say that's who we are. We do what's right for good or for ill.
My point there though is simply that Hume and Mallon is not the same thing. Hume is a precious piece of SDLP heritage and values, and
Seamus Mallon isn't.
And Seamus Mallon much less so. He left behind a mischievous book that said, which Micheál Martin has let on, that says that any vote on United Ireland would require consensus. And Mallon put a number on it. He said it has to be at least 40% of the unionist community voting for it. Now that came from Seamus Mallon, not John Hume.
Yeah, well,
but I do think there has to be that sort of the moral guardians of it, for good or for ill. The problem for the SDLP is they've only been the moral guardians of the Good Friday Agreement when it suits their self-interest, and I think that's a weakness for them.
I think they just need to move away from it altogether. Yeah. I mean, we have, I'm teaching students now who were 9 years old when the Brexit referendum happened. If you think the future voters or even thinking
When the Brexit referendum happened?
When the Brexit referendum happened in 2016,
2016, 9 years,
9 years old, yeah. So this is, Tim, they are not worrying about, you can't dine out on what John Hume did 25, 26 years ago, forever and a day. They need to move beyond that in a more consistent way than they've done in the past. So anyway.
I agree with David.
Well, there we go. And look,
let's just spin the Good Friday Agreement. I can get on board with that.
Free public. No, that is not what we said. Anyway, free public.
I get on board with that, David. Michael, visionaries, TUV visionaries.
We did not. Look, you're all excited, and we haven't even got to the Irish language yet.
It's not even worth responding to.
I know. Anyway, SDLP conference.
I better be careful because people think when I make a joke that I'm being really nasty.
You are being really nasty. Anyway, so, if we could move on.
I got pulled up on Twitter for calling you two they. So I'd have. So.
Thank you. Anyway, look, let's move on.
Pronouns.
Let lots more to come from Tim and Michael. We'll look at proposals in Belfast City Council about the Irish language in a moment. Remember, if you'd like to watch the podcast, head to YouTube and search for Stormont Sources. Please subscribe to the channel to get our latest episodes. Watch our clips or leave your comments on X and on TikTok, and be the first to hear about upcoming events and special episodes. Subscribe to our mailing list at stormontsources.com. This is the Stormont Sources podcast. Let's now talk about the Irish language proposals that are before Belfast City Council. Now, we're recording on the evening of Wednesday, the 1st of October. The Council will vote on this tonight, but the proposals look set to be passed. Belfast City Councillors will decide later whether to adopt a new language policy, which would lead to a more widespread use of Irish across the city. Sinn Féin have said that they hope this new policy, if passed, will lead to a new English-Irish bilingual logo being displayed on council vehicles and uniforms, as well as signs. The Democratic Unionist Party have said that this new policy is quote-unquote madness. They've also expressed concerns about the safety of council staff, and they've also claimed that the plans have not been fully costed and have said that they are divisive. I think this is easily our 4th or 5th time discussing it since February, since we launched this podcast. Timothy, I am assuming you are not a fan of this new proposal.
Well, I think it's not been costed, and that's the big problem. This is not good government, and that point's been made on the media ad nauseum, I think, over the last 24 hours or so. This is a proposal that's being brought forward. We don't know how much it's going to cost. I think this is just further weaponization of the Irish language in Belfast. I think this is just ill thought through, not costed. It's not good government, and just really is just another round of these depressing culture wars that Sinn Féin are engaged in, of trying to, assert dominance in this city. And it is depressing. I just think, if they really were interested in what's best for people in Belfast, if they really were interested in what's best for Irish speakers in Belfast, this is not the way to go about it. I mean, we even have this preposterous thing today on Talkback where Emmett McDonough Brown is going on about taking the English out of logos as well to put on to people's jumpers as the empty bins in Belfast. So, I mean,
the proposal is to put the crest, just the crest.
The proposal is to put the English and Irish on. That's what Sinn Féin
No.
want.
But the proposal he was talking about, though.
Yeah, and the Alliance Party are saying, well, look, we're not going to vote for that. What we'll vote for is just the crest with no language. We're now getting into the realms of the ridiculous. I mean, this is just utter nonsense. I mean, Belfast City Council's probably, at its best when they're talking about things that they've got no competence over, which they do in most council meetings as well. They talk about whether they should buy coke from Palestine or whatever the resolutions are. I mean, the Belfast City Council is just becoming a parody of itself.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So good government there. I'll remember that the next time the DUP do you think it'd be really bad if there was an example of bad government?
Do you think a policy in an abstract? Let's not talk about this, but David, is it good government to bring forward a policy and you have no idea what it's going to cost?
Well, I think well, hang on here. First of all, we've talked about there is a ring fence fund of around about £2 million, right? On this, first of all, it could be lower than the £2 million that have been talked about, because unionists on the one hand are saying, well, no one's going to really use this or utilize these services, but yet the cost may blow out. Well, you can't have that every which way. If a service isn't massively accessed, then the cost of it will go down. So the unionist parties can't have that. Hang on. And number two, as was noted on Talkback, the unionist parties have not helped themselves, because nearly every proposal that has come forward on the Irish language has been opposed by the unionist parties. I mean, no proposal, Tim, let's be frank about this, no proposal on the Irish language is supported by unionist parties. That's
I
just
would
a
have
fact.
no problem with
I know, I didn't say
sensible
you. I'm not
Irish
talking about
language
you. I'm
policy.
talking about the unionist parties.
Well, no, but what I said, as a unionist who pays rates in Belfast, so do you have some skin in this game?
Solid citizen.
A solid citizen, pays a lot of rates in Belfast.
You do not pay a lot of rates. First of all, very few households in Northern Ireland pay a lot of rates.
Well, my rates are pretty high, to be honest with you. I mean, my rates are quite a large bill, I have to say. Not the largest bill in Belfast, but it feels quite large. So I think, look, all we want to see is things that are costed and things that are sensible. And the problem I think we've got right now is the Irish language is being weaponised, particularly by Belfast City Council, in a way that is it just makes no sense. I mean, we've talked about the Irish street signs before. 15%. You take Shandon Park, just down the road from where I live. It has voted, 16% of the people who live in Shannon Park have voted in favour of an Irish language sign going on that road. And that just feels absolutely preposterous. Absolutely preposterous. That's what changes a sign. Like, what on earth is that sign going on Shannon Park for? It makes absolutely no sense. And we see this, repeated across the city. And, I do think it's valid to say, what are workers going to do? I think there is an HR issue here, that this is clearly a politically motivated thing. It is clearly something that's there to try and mark out the city as a national city. Well, what are people who hold a different political perspective, who work for the council, what are they going to do? Their HR rights to have a neutral work environment are not being respected. And clearly this is not going to go through in the way it's being told, because there's no way that is going to be the case in the end. Look, if there's ever anything that the call-in mechanism for local government was designed to do, this is it. Unionist parties should call it in, and if the chief executive of Belfast City Council says, we've got a KC's opinion that's that deals with that, take it to court. Then let's have this once and for all. Let the High Court decide what the call-in mechanisms are or they're not. That's what the unionist parties should be doing. That's what I'd be doing if I was a councillor in Belfast City Hall.
As we talk about costing money to institutions,
Michael, it would only cost about 40 or 50.
Well, I am bored to death talking about Irish language disputes, whether it's a railway station or council vehicles or council staff. I'm generally supportive.
Don't turn off now, listeners, by the way.
I'm generally supportive of anything that promotes the Irish language. I think it's a beautiful language. I think it connects beautifully ourselves to places and to the past, and should be nurtured and cherished and developed. So no problem with that. But I'm a slight imposter, given that I only have the couple of focal myself and don't have. I'm not fluent by any means.
You've only a couple of what did you say there?
It's couple of focal, Focal. Means the few. It means in Irish the few words.
I thought you were doing it, David McCann, and dropping an F-bomb.
No F-bombs here in Lurgan. We're much too civilised for that.
Just love how Tim kind of makes the point for you about maybe an ignorance or a hostility toward the language.
Yeah, but
I have no ignorance or hostility. I agree with Michael. Beautiful language should be preserved.
I have a great love of the language, but I do not believe in shoving it down people's throats for political reasons, and I do not believe in the kind of random waste of large amounts of money. So those are the principles. I don't know the detail of this. It does sound to me like there's a HR issue. It does sound to me like there's probably a legal issue as well with the call-in. Although our interim legal advisor on Stormont Sources, Jamie Bryson, says this is a penalty kick to win this case. I doubt it, but I think certainly there's a case to make. But let me go back and give you a little bit of history that I was involved in myself. I was the spad to the minister who introduced the new system of local government, and we were, and the DUP and Sinn Féin were very keen to get it done because they'd carved up the councils, 6 unionist ones, 4 nationalist ones, heavily nationalist, none of the 10 ever to change complexion, and Belfast to be sort of neutral in the middle with the Alliance Party holding sway. And of course, what has happened is Belfast has gone nationalist. The nationalists can actually control it, even if the Alliance Party side with the Unionists. So that is gone. But when that was going through, and we were being pushed to get it through because the DUP couldn't wait to get their hands on these juicy big new councils, we left to the very end the protections that were to be built into the legislation. And those were things like petitions of concern. And we made the point at the time to the DUP and the Ulster Unionist Party that those protections are essential as part of the setup of these new councils and the legislation. And they voted against them. We haven't previously given us the impression that they would accept them. They voted against them, even though we said they will protect you in time. And so if they're unhappy about stuff being railroaded through councils, they're the reason it's easy to railroad stuff through councils.
Tim, where did you work in 2014 when this came in?
Well, I could say I had absolutely nothing to do with this. Right? different spad.
Mark H. Durkin was the minister at the time and did a very fine job.
Yeah,
the council, council, the super councils have been a roaring success. Yeah,
I'm sure it was somebody else's fault in OFM, DFM, wasn't mine.
But on serious note, whilst I've been teasing you, Tim, over that, there, a serious point to make is about. I do think there is room for compromise. Alliance have signalled that. Alliance have said about the uniforms that they, and I'm with you. Like, I do not think a council worker should be compelled to wear something on their uniform that they would feel uncomfortable with. I agree. I don't think that is a fair or it's a fair expectation for any employee. And Belfast City Council workers are visible out and around, out and about across the city, and go into all areas as well. So I can understand that as well.
Although I see uniforms worn by staff in other councils, Mid-Ulster or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's Irish language emblazoned on their outfits. Yeah. And I'm sure some of those people aren't huge fans of the Irish language.
And this is the thing that's coming back. I mean, there are council areas where a policy like this is in place. But look, in terms of how we do it, we'll wait and see what way the debate goes tonight. I would be gobsmacked if it's not passed, because the numbers are there to pass it. When you combine every other party, and you were talking about Alliance, the Greens, People for a Profit, Sinn Féin, SDLP, that's north of 40 of the 60 councillors. So this will go through.
It's going to pass because it's already passed through the committee. Yeah. So if you're listening on Thursday, it's the morning after the night before it has passed. This is an ill thought out policy. It's an uncosted policy. It's a policy that it's just going to lead to more division within the city. And I just think it's bad government all round. Look, let me be absolutely clear. I have no particular difficulty with the Irish language. I think languages should be preserved. I think languages should be promoted. I think there's a good, sociological, anthropological, whatever reason to preserve what is good from the past. Languages are good, should be preserved. I don't think this language should be the preserve of nationalism. The problem is nationalism and republicanism has made it their preserve. They've gone out of their way to make this a political weapon. They have weaponized it. That's the problem. I think Sinn Féin and the SDLP would be better de-escalating the weaponization of the Irish language and try and start to do things that people can get on board with. And I think that's the problem. You've heightened this up so much, ramped it up so much that it is now weaponized.
And you're saying
it is a weapon against unionists.
And you're saying with a straight face that none of the unionist parties have weaponized the issue of language?
No, it was weaponized by Republicans. They brought it onto the battle pitch, and unionists have responded.
LEAFA funding, Tim. Who cut that?
Unionists. But that's part of the battle. So what happened was it has been weaponized for 20 or 30 years. LEAFA funding was 2016?
2016.
I mean, this is 15, 16 years of weaponization. That wasn't the first battle shot in the Irish language war.
I didn't say it was.
But you're going LEAFA.
Your argument is that it's all nationalists. Your argument is that it's all nationalists.
If you take it back to the place where this was weaponized, who weaponized it? It was Republicans who weaponized the language, trying to make it a stick to beat unionists with. They brought it onto the battle pitch, and unionists have responded. If I was a Republican, which I'm not, I would be trying to de-escalate the weaponization of Irish, because I think if you were really about parity of esteem, if you're really about preserving the good of the language, you would not go about it in this way. That's just a fact.
I agree with that, but I think ultimately unionists can de-weaponize this issue themselves just by showing a willingness to embrace it.
Oh, but they won't. But none of the unionist parties will.
On scale, Ella.
Oh, I agree.
I mean, the idea that the unionist parties have just sat back. By the way, I don't disagree that have there been unhelpful comments and approaches from within nationalism toward the Irish language? Yes, Yes, but the idea that it's just been nationalist, putting this upon poor unionists and poor unionist parties have had to just have just sat there. I just think that's an absolute.
But
nonsense.
I think if there was sensible will on both sides, and there's not sensible will on both sides, let's call it unionists as well. They have not been sensible on this issue as well. But I think they have been primarily reactive, and we've now got into this entrenched position over 30 years of reacting. But if unionists were prepared to be sensible on the issue, if Republicans were prepared to be sensible on the issue, I think there's a way forward that could easily be found on language. Scotland is a pretty good model. It's not the way it is in Wales. The Scottish language is not something that's hugely promoted by the SNP. It is not something that is, on every single road sign throughout the country. It's not something that's, is rammed down the throats of people in school. There's a sensible approach to Scots Gaelic that's taken, and an appropriate response to Scots Gaelic that's taken, which is totally in contrast to what happens in Wales. It's interesting, people who promote this always go to Wales and never go to Scotland first whenever Republicans are promoting this, because Wales is a wholly different situation. Scotland has a much more sensible approach. I think we could look at that, and we could see maybe a more sensible way forward.
I would just note that the cultural package in New Decade New Approach was actually a very sensible, and did show the Irish language lobby and nationalist parties, well, along with unionists as well, were willing to compromise and do this here.
Well, unionists signed up to it, so
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. There was the idea that nationalists have just adopted a Wales only approach is absolute nonsense.
But I think if we were to come back to that New Decade New Approach document and have a sensible discussion around that, I think all sense has gone out in this issue on both sides.
I actually chaired a panel in Tourists, which is the East Belfast Irish language programme, with the minister in Scotland who brought in the Gaelic Act, and he gave some really good feedback to that audience, and he was actually a fascinating guy to talk to. I think it's Alistair Morrison, I think was his name. He brought it in, and he gave some really, really, really useful feedback about how they got that through and how they kind of dealt with that. And again, it actually ended up being what we did 2 years later with New Decade New Approach, actually, was where we landed. So look, we have been.
That's why I said Scotland provides a much more sensible way forward than Wales does. Not that the Welsh way, everybody's bought into the Welsh way. That's good for them, but it is not going to be something that can be applied in Northern Ireland. I think Republicans dial it back, unionists listen with a bit more attentiveness, and maybe we get through this issue. Unfortunately, Republicans aren't going to dial it back, and what we're seeing in Belfast City Council is further ramping up, further escalation, further entrenchment, and you know what? If that's what they want, they're going to be met head on with it.
Okay. Well. Look, that's a bit of a thing. Well, interesting to see what the guys on Holyrood Sources would say.
And the thing about it is, David, when you went to East Belfast, I bet you couldn't speak any Irish in the wee panel.
What does that matter? Well, it
wasn't just
a
point out. You're so passionate about this language.
My brother was at that and heard David.
Irrelevant. I'm not
a student at Tourists.
It's irrelevant that you can't speak.
It is irrelevant. That's like saying I can only have a view on parading if I'm in the Orange Order. Nonsense.
No, it's not.
Nonsense.
But it's not at all. But you don't have any interest in learning it.
It's absolutely
so
nonsense.
Precious to you. So precious to you.
It's not precious. It's not about being precious to me, Tim. It is precious. It is precious to the community that speak it, Tim. You see, it's called empathy, Tim. You can have empathy with groups of people that you maybe are not part of, and it's a native language of this island.
And I have already said that I want to see it preserved. I want to see it promoted.
And many of our street signs already, the name of our current city is derived from Irish, Tim. So
I think Irish immersion schools are great to send your kids to them, and they probably get a much better education and probably prepared much better for life if they're in immersion. Immersion in any language that's not your first language is definitely the way to educate.
So we're all agreed then.
No, so we're not. Tim just doesn't want to provide any support to it.
What I'm saying is, if it is weaponized, that force is going to be met with force, and that's really. So if you really want Irish preserved, if you really want Irish promoted, you've got to de-escalate it. Sinn Féin are. It's their weapon. They're on the battle pitch, and they're going to be met in the battle pitch, and that's just the fact.
Okay, right. I think we've talked around this enough. But look, no doubt we'll be coming back to this.
Sinead, is that what
Sinead, no doubt the Irish language is not going away anytime soon. So we'll move on to our final topic, school uniforms. So the school uniforms bill is continued its progress through the Assembly this week. The bill is seeking to tackle the rising costs of school uniforms, which are putting families under financial pressure. The bill will provide the necessary powers to ensure that schools adhere to statutory guidance to address affordability of school uniforms. Education Minister Paul Givan has said the bill aims to strike a balance between recognising the role that school uniforms play in the ethos of our schools and ensuring the school uniforms are affordable for all. It will see strengthened statutory guidelines created to ensure that transparency and affordability are at the core of school uniforms policies. Now, critics of the bill complain that it doesn't go far enough. Vice Chair of the Education Committee, Pat Sheehan from Sinn Féin, called the bill a very watered down piece of legislation, and we're not even sure what impact it will have. So I'll start off first with you, Tim, as you know, father of 2 kids in school. Do you think this bill is just window dressing? Does it not go far enough?
Well, for full disclosure, I should probably say that I was on the parental engagement group, which kicked this whole debate off, and engaged
So you're to blame. Good.
engaged with Michelle McIlveen at the time, and she was minister, who promised legislation, and this is the DUP delivering on their promises. Now, we have been very complimentary about Paul Givan over the course of this podcast, I think, and how he has gone about his business, and we've been at pains to say we're not talking about the actual outworking of the policies that he's putting in place. We're just saying that he's been the best minister at navigating the legal structures. Now, this is one of his policies where I actually think he needs to really take a step back, and unfortunately the bill is now very much at the end of its passage through the Assembly, and there's not going to be much scope to be able to change this bill. I think, unfortunately, putting the guidance on a statutory footing is a great start, but unfortunately, I do not think that schools are going to reduce the cost of school uniforms because of this bill. I think there's more is going to need to be done. This bill will not solve the problem. A secondary school uniform is over £1,000. A primary school uniform is about 900 quid. That's what people are paying for their kids to go to school. And this bill is not going to do anything to reduce that cost significantly. And that's just a fact. Like, the minister needs to be more prescriptive. The department, yes, is taking the powers to be prescriptive. But if you don't go into schools and tell boards of governors this is the maximum amount of money this school uniform can be, they're simply not going to change what they're doing. You know, you can do window dressing around that. You can have guidance that, you know, you can go to schools and say you need to adhere to this. But boards of governors, particularly in voluntary grammar schools, are not going to change unless they're told by the minister you have to change. And unless the minister is going to get tough with them, take the powers in this bill that are in provisions with the bill onto himself and lay down the law to boards of governors, there is going to be no change. So this bill is not going to reduce your school uniform costs. And that, you know, it's very similar to what we see in England and Wales, what we see in England, and the bill in England, which was sort of life as a private member's bill in the Commons. That bill has not significantly reduced school uniforms costs, and England is looking at this again. So Westminster's looking at this again as to what more can we do in and around school uniforms. And I'm afraid that's going to be the case here, because this bill does not set out a prescriptive way for boards of governors to adhere to rules and regulations. We know what boards of governors are like, particularly involving grammars. They're just going to do what they want. And I think this bill is just going to let them.
Okay, Michael, your thoughts on the
I
bill?
pretty much agree with everything Tim said there. I think it is yet another example of our action man with the Cheshire Cat grin, Minister Givan, being super active and getting onto the thing and maybe rushing it a bit. And I agree with him that it's just not going to get there. Now, what will ultimately matter will be the guidelines, which then have statutory effect, or we call them regulations at that point. Can you be prescriptive in the way that you tell posh schools you can't have a posh uniform, a posh and expensive uniform? Most people agree that the cost of uniforms, particularly when you add in PE kits and all of that leveraged stuff, that it just gets excessively costly. Some people can afford it and are happy to pay it, but a lot of people can't and shouldn't have to. And if the bill doesn't get there, that's a disappointment. Maybe some genius will write the guidelines, and the guidelines with statutory effect may have more impact than we think. maybe there will be some cause for optimism there. But I think, when you're going for primary legislation and you've identified a problem, the primary legislation really ought to nail the problem.
Okay.
And Michael's absolutely right. It doesn't. I mean, what I would do if I was Paul Givan is I would set up a panel that meets yearly to set a limit for what the cost of uniforms can be. And the second thing you need to do is the uniform grant needs to be equal to the limit of what you've set, because right now, it's £1,000 to buy a uniform. You don't get anywhere near that
and
if you're on benefits.
They should outlaw the thing where you must buy it from this sole supplier.
Well, absolutely.
That's a racket.
It should be non-branded. It should be available on the high street. There should be a panel each year that says, look, the limit of cost of school uniforms is, let's say, £250. And then it's incumbent on the Board of Governors to say, this is where you can get our uniform for under £250. These are the shops that you can get it in: Sainsbury's, Tesco, Asda, Wilson's down the high street. They all do this. Is under £250. This is not branded. This is something that anybody can buy in any shop, and that's the way forward. And unless you enforce that, it's not going to happen.
And it's not just it's not just secondary schools. It's going into primary schools now. Like my sister, whenever she was sending the kids back to school, she got 2 daughters. I was amazed the amount she was spending on uniforms. I mean, it's not nowhere near what's been spent in secondary schools, but it is creeping up and it is eating into...
£918, David. £918 is the average cost of a primary school uniform. £1,086 is the average cost per pupil of a secondary school, grammar school uniform. Like, that's incredible. £900. Yeah. £1,000, that's the cost of an iPhone, for goodness sake. It's hugely expensive to send your kids to school, and this bill will not solve that. It will not change that.
Okay, well, maybe Paul will listen and go back to the drawing board and maybe take on board some of the criticism. I know he was very critical of some of the amendments that people were trying to bring forward to the bill and trying to kind of knock the bill into some sort of shape, but maybe he will. Take some of the stuff.
Well, so it's very late in the day. It's almost at the end of its assembly. It is almost
at the end of its legislative passage. But again, I think Paul maybe is probably seeing this as a start to progress on. But then we're 18 months out from the election. So
I mean, it's certainly a start. And look, it's better than nothing. And if I think if the department can get on top of schools, particularly as Michael says, the posh grammars, that might be a good start. But I just fear it's not going to lead to the change that we need.
And then, look, I mean, it's just a start. Could be a slogan for Stormont since it came back in February 2024. Look, gents, thank you very much for going around the houses with me on those topics. Now, you may have heard Tim referencing Welsh politics in the Irish language segment. Well, if you are more interested in Welsh politics, Stormont Sources has joined the Shortbread Media stable. If you want to learn more about what's going on in Cardiff Bay, make sure you check that out. There is a potentially historic Senate election coming up next May in Wales. So that podcast will keep you covered for all the ins and outs before what could be quite a historic campaign where Labour could lose power for the first time in the history of devolution. Okay, thanks very much.
What's interesting there, David, is you've used more Welsh in this podcast, Senate sources, than you've used Irish.
Garamelga, Tim.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Tim. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Michael. And thank you for joining us on the Stormont Sources podcast. Drop us a WhatsApp with your questions or comments, 0333 404 6507. Remember to use the word Stormont so we know it's for this podcast. We'll talk to you again next week. Thank you for listening. Iha wai.